There's a hidden gem in GT7 that will be disappearing shortly, and it gave me one of the best races I've ever had. To me, it's a perfect blend of what made the classic Gran Turismo games legendary, and what makes the current generation fantastic as well. The cars are definitely not for everyone, at least not at first glance, especially those craving modern race cars and blistering speeds, but the actual driving experience as well as the racing itself are a shining example of the heart and soul of the early Gran Turismo titles, expressed through the modern multiplayer experience. The original Gran Turismo experience was almost entirely single-player, with the player starting a racing career simulation driving something either completely not sporty or a very basic-level older sports car. While collecting as many cars as possible was definitely part of the fun, you always had the option to buy or win new cars, but a lot of the fun for me, and many that I know, came from building slower cars into much more competitive beasts. While the classic career mode has been scrapped in favor of the menu books, the ability to tune and improve your car is still here, and thanks to the modern era of GT, you can now customize the livery and the looks much more than you ever could in the classic game. Enter Race A. Clocking in at over 9 minutes, it's a surprisingly long offering for Race A, and it's even longer than Race B this week. As you can see, there's no shortage of extremely close action. In an easily digestible race occurring every single 20 minutes this week, the amount of actual racing you get in each race is incredible. This combo is proof positive that you don't need 500 horsepower to race, and each time I take to the track it reminds me of all those econo boxes I tuned to beat the AI, only this time, I get to race real people. Since you can only borrow a car to use, they created 10 distinct, extremely well done liveries, which makes the race feel official and immersive. With a mix of real and fake companies adorning the liveries, it feels very much in the world of Gran Turismo. With all these facets considered, it's a shame that we may never see these cars again. There's no way to purchase these liveries or even see the parts or the tune of the car, which makes this week all the more special to me. I ended up liking this combo so much that I spent a little time on the time trial and ended up 7th in the world. Take note of A. McCabe at the top, also known as Doodle. At the end of the video, I'll show you the incredible battle that I had with him, but I want to show you some of what we got up to before that. I didn't actually discover this race until something like 2 a.m. in my region, and I also wasn't paying enough attention to the fact that it's a standing start, so I got myself a false start. But the benefit of racing at this time meant that there were actually no people that I would usually race. I think all of these drivers were something like D-class. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that, but that definitely meant that I wasn't going to have much of a challenge, even with that false start. I found myself in 2nd place by the 2nd turn. Still cautiously optimistic, and of course I was looking for a good race. I didn't really know what to expect of Jonas, but it did seem like he knew what he was doing. He was on the line, he had pretty good pace, and I admittedly didn't really know what my pace should be at this point. Even in race A and B, where the one-time multipliers are used for both tire wear and fuel consumption, they still have an effect, so I was still feeling out the car, but at this point I realized I was going to have to switch to a different region to get a really good race. However, when it comes to racecraft, pace is a completely different animal, so I always race with respect and was very pleasantly surprised to see Jonas put up a very clean fight on a corner where even most A and A+ drivers can't seem to hold their line. Our new friend Jonas not only held his line, but he actually kept pace with me through Degner 1, and it wasn't until Degner 2 that I was able to break away. It wasn't actually until after Spoon that I managed to completely break the slipstream, and so I was very impressed by his racecraft, despite the fact that I believe he was a B driver, maybe even a C driver, so shout out to Jonas. I ended up winning that race by 14 seconds, but I was so enthralled by the possibilities that I had to jump to the EMEA region, where it was late morning, and many more people raced at that time. When I loaded up on the other side of the ocean, I was very happy to see that not only were there more Bs, a few As, but there was also another A+. This time I was much more prepared for the standing start, and so I didn't mess it up quite as much, but I hadn't quite figured out the best way to get off the line. I was using first gear and traction control 1, but it actually turns out that is not the fastest way to do it. Switching quickly to my radar, I realized that the guy next to me got a much better start, so I was going to have to figure something out, but for now I just had to focus on making sure that we kept this beginning part of the race clean. Another fun aspect of the slow cars is that when they do collide, they don't seem to have the same ping-pong physics that you see with the much faster cars, especially the cars like the Group 3 cars. When cars collide in this class, they don't actually seem to bounce very far at all, making it a little bit more realistic, but even better than realism, it's more fun. You're going to find that people online are definitely not going to be experts all the time, especially when you're not in a top split race, and so collisions are going to happen. If you can rely on the cars actually staying on track when these inevitable collisions do happen, then you can make sure that you're going to have a lot more fun. Seeing this, coupled with a great experience in the previous race with Jonas, gave me more confidence to be more aggressive despite not knowing any of these drivers. In my guide videos, and of course some of the other videos I make, I frequently talk about how it's really important to kind of get to know the people you race against, but in a situation like this, that's not exactly possible. Since all of these people were strangers, all of these interactions I was having with them were the very first interactions I've had, and again, I was pleasantly surprised to not have to deal with any kind of dirty drivers, even as far as the hairpin, which is a notoriously dangerous spot at Suzuka. Since I hadn't really gotten a chance to really battle head-to-head, at least for not more than a couple corners, I wasn't really sure what to expect of the slipstream. Whether it's real, custom, or weak slipstream, it doesn't really matter because each car is going to handle completely differently in the slipstream. Some cars are going to be really powerful in the slipstream, some cars aren't going to benefit from it very much at all, so I was kind of figuring it out live. In what was quickly becoming a theme, I attacked the driver ahead and he made a very clean and well done defense attempt. I kept at it and I got the inside line coming at a spoon and did benefit from a much better exit. It looked like we were just close enough to the pack ahead that he might actually get some slipstream, but then they moved to the inside and any possible slipstream he had disappeared. I was able to get all the way in front of him before the infamous 130R, and so I felt pretty safe. If you look at my rear view right now, you can see our friend Arkeys74. Arkeys is a fantastic dude, and I would love it if you went to his channel here on YouTube and he subscribed. He's a really great guy, he's a fast driver, and honestly, he's just a sweetheart. Unfortunately, he got in a little bit of a situation with the guy behind, and so he didn't get to join me on the hunt for the next four. I was very pleasantly surprised to find myself very close to the pack ahead, which meant I had slipstream, but I was also glad to not be too close to that pack because 4 cars this close at Suzuka Turn 1 almost never goes well. 2 people defending and 2 people attacking meant it would be 2 sets of 2 wides through a dangerous section, but I was very happy to see that no one went off at all. There was barely any contact, and the contact that did happen barely had an effect on the cars because, again, these cars are pretty slow and they're pretty light. Now, despite the fact that there wasn't really a disaster, Super Poirot definitely had a moment, and that led to him completely cutting the track. This not only slowed him down, but it also gave him a penalty as well as dirty tires. So I took my opportunity to get all the way next to him, and he kept fighting. As always, I'm definitely going to treat everyone with respect, so I gave him space there, and he in turn gave me space as well. I took a little bit more of the line than I needed to, so I lost a little bit of momentum there, but I knew that no matter what, as long as I stayed close to Super Poirot, at least when we get to the point where he has to serve that penalty, I was going to get his position. I was very happy to see that he had mostly recovered, and by the time that we got to Degner 1, he had kept it clean and kept it close, but he had another bit of a moment on Degner 2, so I decided I was just going to give him a little bit more space and not try to be too aggressive for now. This doesn't mean I'm going to completely give up my attack, but I'm definitely not going to take too many chances when it comes to trying to get in front of him. He was making a few mistakes still, but he did keep it clean, and so when I did have the opportunity to pass him, I took it. If he were able to stay with the group ahead and not make too many mistakes, I would have actually pushed him and tried deliberately to stay behind him because it would essentially be free slipstream. If I could bump draft him, then I would be in a better position to attack the guys ahead rather than taking all the time it took to get past him. But I didn't really have a choice, and so since I did get cleanly behind him, I was very happy to see that once again I was in the slipstream of the top 3. Despite the fact that I was this close and I had a good run, I had to remain vigilant because the next corner is the devilish 130R. An absolute monster of a corner on its own, trying to attack or defend there is something I would advise against to almost anyone, so I was glad to see the guy ahead lift a slot behind. Unfortunately, they both went off on their own. Now I had to wonder if they would calculate the stopping distance with dirty tires, but again I was pleasantly surprised to see that Jordy not only nailed his braking, but he gave me space as well. Dybul seemed to go way too wide and way too deep, but again he stayed to his line, didn't try to do anything crazy, and I was lucky enough to take both of their positions. If you've ever raced at Suzuka, then you know when you pull off a pass at the Casio Triangle, you have to watch your mirrors from the same guys going into turn 1, so naturally, I defended immediately and decided early on I was going to be very brave on the brakes. Similar to Monza T1, you really have to be careful when it comes to Suzuka T1 because the very nature of the shape of the corners 1 and 2 means that people behind you can very easily slot in behind you or slot in next to you and just push you off the track. And if they do it right, they won't get any kind of penalties because that's just unfortunately the way the Gran Turismo is. But again, for like the 50th time in this race, I was very happy to see that those guys remained clean. So again, shout out to everyone I've been racing. It's been really amazing to have this kind of experience on the second time I've ever done this race with people I've never raced against. It's really refreshing to have this kind of clean racing, just jumping into a race, especially against people who aren't even in the top split. So again, big shout out to all these guys I've been racing. By far the worst part of this race is the length. I was able to catch 1.5 seconds from the leader, and despite that, it wasn't quite enough. I find myself with the fastest lap, faster than I'd done in the previous race, so I knew my pace was improving, but it just wasn't quite enough to be able to pick off an A+ driver when I'm starting all the way from the back. It was unfortunately too late for me to continue, but I actually would have loved to race this same group of guys one more time. Since I knew I was going to be streaming the next day, I immediately went to bed happy knowing I was going to get to challenge my own region when I woke up. I streamed it here on YouTube so you can actually go back and see all these races live, but I still want to show you the highlights, including the best race I've had in years. I've been lucky enough to race Doodle many times over the years, and the last time I had a race this satisfying was actually against him in the AE86 at Fuji. We'll get to that in a bit, however, as there was much more action throughout the day. Before I cover my favorite race of the day, I want to show you something funny. I've talked about how these cars seem to be safer because they're slower and lighter, but safer doesn't necessarily mean safe, and this right here proved it. I have a feeling Ricky Bobby actually heard me complain that I wouldn't be able to race him because he's the only person that could really give me a challenge in this race, so he pulled over, went to the back, and actually helped me get in front of Frank, but you'll see what happened. I was a little bit too courageous on 130R, and I immediately stuffed it, threw it right into a wall. Front-wheel drive cars are frequently safer, and in some situations, when the rear end gets loose, you can just keep the throttle pinned and the car will right itself. Even if the front tires slide a bit, it can just make you slide to the correct orientation, but there are obviously limits to that. I want to take a moment to shout out Ricky Bobby, not just for having a really fantastic screen name, but also for being a good sport and trying to help me out and give me a really good race. So here's to you, man. In only, I believe, the second race of the day, Chat and I decided that the yellow car was indeed the meta car because yellow cars are always fast. Just like my old Corvette. I miss that thing every day. By this point, we had realized that starting in second gear with no traction control was the way to go, so I was able to get a really good start on all of the races after this. Actually, I shouldn't say all of them because at least one time I wasn't paying any attention and I got at least one false start, and another time I think I just didn't even pay attention to the fact that a race was starting. But this time, I got a really good start. Going from 10th to 6th by the start of the S's, I also noticed that one person ahead had a big penalty. And so at the very least, if I could stay clean, I should be able to get 5th place by the time he served it. Still feeling confident from the races I had done the night before and noticing the guy ahead was at least serious about racing with that screen name, I decided I could continue being hyper aggressive and not have to worry too much about the other drivers. Fun fact, the very first daily race video I ever made for YouTube was against Eves, the guy who was attacking on my outside right here at this very same track. I 100% always have good races against him, so big shout out to Eves. I had decided already I was going to treat this like a proper top split race and trust the other drivers. Despite a bit of an incident at Degner, the action stayed clean. With Eves hot on my tail, I knew I was going to have to protect my line, but since I got a better run than 350 Racing, I had to decide to kind of just try to squeeze in next to him until I realized that I was going to have to brake directly behind him. I usually don't try to brake directly behind people when it comes to a hairpin. I like to use a completely different line if possible because the timing is so delicate when it comes to slowing down that much that you pretty much always lose out when it comes to trying to copy someone's line. I was lucky enough, however, that I got a better exit, and so I was still able to stay next to him at least until the slipstream pulled him a little bit ahead of me. Since I had a bit of an overlap, I knew I could be really brave but still give him space, but I actually think that 350 Racing didn't trust me, and I don't blame him. I usually wouldn't trust anyone that I don't know when it comes to defending on the outside of Spoon. I would probably, instead of try too hard like that, I would probably just slow down and let them have the inside line if I didn't know him, but shout out to him for actually keeping it on the track or at least getting back on the track quickly and only losing 2 positions after that. You may also notice that Eves went to try to do my favorite move when it comes to passing someone who's already being passed. I think that even if 350 Racing hadn't gone off, that Eves would have been able to get in front of him too. When you pass someone, you leave a bit of a vacuum. There's a period of time where you can't possibly close that line, and if you stay close enough to the person in front of you who is already passing someone, then they can't close it on you either. I learned that because I've lost many positions to that. I haven't gained that many, but I've lost many positions by being passed by 2 people at a time. Jumping to the end of that same lap, I had talked about 130R many times, and I will continue to do so because it actually claimed another victim, and so I got a freebie. That left me and Burgerinos to battle for the victory. Leading into the first corner, I was very close to Burgerinos, and I had somehow put 3 seconds between myself and Eves. Without having to worry about the pressure behind, I could focus entirely on just trying to attack Burgerinos, and if I can get in front of him, then of course I'd have to worry about defending against him, but 1 versus 1 is infinitely better than 1 versus 2. I don't actually know who Burgerinos is. I see them from time to time in the top split when it comes to the daily races, but I don't think I've ever seen them in the top split in Manu or even Nations. But I do know that they're quick. I don't remember if I've ever actually battled them side to side, so I wasn't quite sure what to expect. In general, and not always, when people are really quick, they're also clean. And of course, this is just a complete stereotype. There's no real reason for me to think that, but I gave him my trust, and as you can see, I was very well rewarded. Call it karma for giving Jonas the exact same courtesy when it came to the very first race that I did this week. Call it whatever you want, but I was so incredibly happy to be able to pull off a pass on Degner 1 against someone that I don't think I've actually had any experience with. Massive shout out to Burgerinos, and definitely an apology because I absolutely said on stream multiple times that I thought it was a Smurf account because I didn't think Burgerinos was a real name. I thought he was talking about burgers, like hamburgers, but I definitely didn't mean to be disrespectful. If that's actually your last name, then I feel extremely bad. But you're a fantastic driver, and I really enjoyed racing with you. Thank you so much for keeping it clean. In general, it can be pretty scary passing someone that early on the final lap of Suzuka because there are so many full throttle sections where they can utilize the slipstream, but I was lucky enough to get a good enough exit out of Spoon, so I was able to just stay all the way in front, and I claimed my first victory of the day. If you've enjoyed these races so far, I definitely encourage you to check out my last live stream. And you can see how I did with the other races. I think I did it 6, 7, maybe even 8 times, and I had some really good results, but I've been teasing this particular race since the very beginning of this video. At this point, I was 7th place in the world, and the first place in the world was Doodle, our friend A. McCabe. And as you can see, he has another account, so he can also race from the back. So he decided to join me as we both tried to see what we could do against the entire pack. To absolutely no one's surprise, he was all the way in front of me by the second turn, and I found myself almost entirely off the track. Racing through traffic on your own is one thing, but when you have another driver who is your speed or even better, as Doodle is, it's really difficult to try to keep up with them and make the same moves they make, because usually when they're able to pull off a pass, that gap closes, and so you have to find another opportunity to make the same pass. On top of the fact that you have to create a new opportunity where an opportunity had just arisen, you also have to deal with the fact that people do not like getting passed, and so a lot of times when people get passed, they're going to be even more defensive as you go up and try to do the same thing. I can't help but laugh at the screen name of the guy directly ahead. You know that guy's had some really annoying instances while playing this game, and I definitely feel for him. Mr. Don't Hit Me, or Ms. Don't Hit Me, whoever you are, I definitely feel for you, and I was definitely not planning on hitting you. Now, with all these people obviously defending, I decided to take the longest, widest line possible. 1, because I didn't think anyone else would, but 2, because I can keep up more momentum, and that meant that I could possibly get a good run coming out of it, and that's exactly what happened. I've been looking for about a half of a lap for an opportunity to pass Don't Hit Me, and I just found it, just as Doodle was about to put on another move on Edible Auto. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm never going to really go for an outside pass on any of the dangerous corners, probably anywhere, against someone that I either don't know or don't trust, and I don't know which one of those it was for Doodle, but he really intelligently checked up and just slotted in behind Edible Auto. Once again, we found ourselves in a train leading to the terrible 130R. I actually don't think it's terrible. I have lots of funny words to describe it with, but it's just really scary. I actually really like the corner, and it is legendary, but it's definitely not the kind of corner you want to take lightly, and so I was very happy to see Doodle slot behind Edible, and he very easily got in front of him when Edible went off. Given the danger of the situation and the fact that I've had issues with Edible Auto in the past, I decided I was just going to try to get behind them and get the best exit that I possibly could. The timing all really lucked out, and despite the fact that I wasn't able to get in front of Edible after all of that, I knew I was going to have another opportunity in the future. At this point, I didn't actually know what was going on behind me. I knew that Eves didn't quite get the best exit, but I thought he was going to be able to use the slipstream behind Edible and then get all the way in front of me and potentially pull off a pass, and that's actually why I thought the person next to me was him. I was a bit surprised to feel any contact because Eves is really clean, but it wasn't until now that I realized it was actually Photoforum who had gotten in front of me. And despite the fact that there was a little bit of contact, it wasn't really egregious, and I kept my line, so I wasn't too upset. With the race over a quarter of the way done, Doodle was 2 spots ahead of me, so I was going to have to really make some moves if I was going to catch him, let alone try to beat him. If Doodle got ahead of Merploid while I was this far back, there was a near zero chance I would be able to catch up to him, let alone beat him. I think the only way that I would possibly be able to beat him in that situation is if he just disconnected from the race. As we approached Degner, I was actually afraid that Doodle would be able to get all the way in front of everyone before then, and there's no way those guys were going to be able to keep up with him through Degner, and it would be over for me. But Doodle went off. I'm not exactly sure if that was Merploid's fault or if it was just a rare mistake from Doodle, but I have to say I was actually pretty excited that I was now this close. I wasn't excited that he went off. I never want my friends to go off, but I was definitely very happy that I was still in the game. After pulling off one of my very favorite passes to pull off, sneaking on the inside after Degner 2, I was happy to find myself in 4th place now with a better run than Edible Auto. Unfortunately, despite my better run, he had slipstream, so once again I found myself directly behind him. At this point, my plan was to stick behind Edible Auto as close as I could and try to get a much better run so I could use the slipstream and possibly pass him before 130R. The exit of Spoon is one of the most difficult corners in all of sim racing for me, so I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to nail it, and luckily I didn't even have to nail it. I was able to get in front of Edible because he made a mistake, and I was still close enough to Doodle and Merploid that I had full slipstream. And for one final time, we find ourselves chasing down 2 people who seem to be next to each other going into 130R. I didn't quite have the vision to see exactly where they were, so I thought that they were actually completely next to each other, but I was happy to see that Doodle was able to pull off the pass before 130R. I'm not sure if Merploid ended up lifting, or if Doodle just ended up getting all the way in front of him, but either way, I now found myself even closer to both of them. Quick shout out to my dying controller, y'all. Since Merploid and I got similar exits and both had similar distances to the car in front, there was virtually no chance I would be able to pull off any move leading into T1. My only hope would be that Merploid would miscalculate his braking leading into T1 since he had the extra overspeed from the slipstream, or he'd be able to get up so he could make a move on Doodle and it would slow both of them down. As I braked into the first corner, I realized that Merploid had kind of a weird line, and I don't know if it's because he was defending or he got distracted or what, so I set myself up so I could get a good exit, but it ended up not mattering because, unfortunately, Merploid hit me. I didn't know if he did it on purpose, but just in case he did, I decided to get behind him and try to go for a more definitive pass. Giving him the benefit of the doubt, this car is really weird. It can sometimes just jump laterally, so I really don't think he did that on purpose. I have to admit that I was definitely giving up hope of actually having a battle with Doodle until I saw that Merploid made a bit of a mistake and drove himself entirely off the track. It is so easy to drive off the track there. It's understeering in any car, so when you're in a front-wheel drive car that's tuned with really weird suspension, it is very easy to go off like that. Now, as I showed you before, Doodle had the world record in this combination at the time of this recording, and I think they reset the leaderboards, but I have no doubt that he will easily get to the world record again. Not only does Doodle have multiple world records in Gran Turismo, in fact multiple Gran Turismos as far as I know, he also has over 100 world records in Mario Kart, which just blows my mind. If my memory serves me correctly, Doodle was too young to do GT Academy the year that I made it in. It was 2014. But he was already much, much faster than me, and he's only gotten faster. I feel like I've also gotten faster, but he's gotten much, much faster. In fact, I don't think I've ever beat him at either a time trial or head-to-head in a race, and I really wanted this to be my first time. Any normal person would have completely gone off the track if they made that mistake there on the exit of Spoon, and I would feel very confident in being able to pass any normal person, but somehow, even with that mistake, he maintained enough momentum that I was still far behind him, even at the end of this long straight with the slipstream. With one full lap to go, I was going to try absolutely everything I could to stay with him at the very least, and if the opportunity would arise, I was going to try to pull off a move. When it comes to weird car combinations, or just street cars in general, anything that doesn't have a lot of aerodynamics or isn't really a race car, I generally do better than when it comes to racing race cars, but unfortunately for me, Doodle is pretty much the best at that type of car. If I was racing anyone else, and they decided to defend on the inside, I would most likely just slot in behind them and not try to pull off a move on the outside. But if I did have the opportunity to get all the way next to him before T1, I would still actually send it, because the funny thing about racing a really clean driver is you can trust them not to push you off track. And if I can trust him, then I might have the advantage on the outside in a corner like that. But it didn't really matter because I wasn't nearly close enough for that. When he made that little mistake, it actually made me change my line, so it actually put me at a disadvantage here. So the gap kind of increased for just a little bit, but I was able to get back on the line and get a little bit closer once again. It's an interesting parallel when you're racing people who are really clean versus people who are not. If you have a reputation of being really clean, people might actually take advantage of that by pulling off a move that you wouldn't really expect them to pull off in a public lobby. But again, that didn't actually come up because I wasn't able to get next to him at all. Going into the Degners, I had considered the fact that I had actually learned how to drive this track by watching his replay, so I was confident staying really close to him, thinking that if I just copied exactly what I've been doing, I would probably be able to just stay right with him without having to worry about possibly hitting him. However, when it comes to the hairpin, like I'd mentioned before, I don't really like following people directly into it, so I decided to take a bit of a different line, hoping I could get a better exit, and even though I felt like I got a better exit at first, it became very clear that I did not. He maintained a lot more momentum than I did through the hairpin. It's all for the better though, and I don't know if I realized it at the time, but if I did manage to get next to him by the time we got to Spoon, he would probably just slot in behind me and then get all the way in front of me before the next braking zone. Now, considering everything I've just talked about, the fact that I've never beaten him, the fact that I could absolutely trust him no matter where I passed him, and the fact that I'm right behind him and I was going to have enough slipstream to possibly get next to him by 130R meant that I just absolutely had to go for it. As you'd expect, early on he took the inside, which meant that I had to use as much of that slipstream as I could, wait till the last second, and then move next to him. I actually felt much more comfortable because if I did hit him, I would be sent off. I wouldn't ruin his race, but as you can see, we didn't have any such issues. I couldn't believe that we made it by so cleanly and so quickly, and I also didn't realize that the two cars behind were the exact same liveries. I made a huge mistake there, thinking that I'd be able to get a better run out of there and he wouldn't be able to get as much momentum having a tighter line, but he's Doodle. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he very rightfully took the win. It's situations like this, when I'm racing one of the best in the world, that I absolutely do not mind losing. I'm going to learn from every single one of those opportunities, and if I do end up losing to him, it doesn't matter whatsoever. The fact that I can even keep up with him for that long means a lot to me, and Doodle, just a massive shout out to you. I love racing you, buddy. That was also way too good to just leave it at that, so we're going to rewind and watch a different angle. From this angle, you can very clearly see the margins that we were dealing with. I think right in the center we did actually end up hitting each other, but it actually makes it more impressive to me because it didn't actually change the trajectory of either of our cars. I definitely wasn't thinking clearly when I tried to pull off this move. What I was trying to do was sacrifice the right-hander so I can get a really good exit out of the left-hander, but even if I did do it better, he's still in front of me and it's a very short run to the end. So GG's Doodle, he definitely deserved that, and again, it was a pleasure racing you, Doodle. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'm going to leave you with a look at my current members. I love every one of you.